Do you have a big job interview coming up, or maybe just a networking event where you're meeting new people? Today we're going to talk about how to introduce yourself in a job interview in English. Greetings, colleagues. I'm Timothy Barrett, and welcome to the 4Business English Rundown. This is the show for professionals from all over the world who want to improve their communication skills in English. Today we're going to talk about how to introduce yourself in a job interview in English. So this is very important because a lot of times if you're learning business English, you're trying to master not only a foreign language, but in the business world so that you can communicate with clients, customers, other colleagues. It can be tricky to, of course, master that language, but also when you're introducing yourself, it can be very intimidating. At the very beginning, maybe you've just entered the room, you're meeting these people for the first time, and for a lot of people, our confidence level is probably at our lowest. But of course, it's a job interview. This is the first impression that you're making with the people who are going to decide whether they hire you or not. You want your confidence level and competence level to be at the highest level. So this is tricky even if you're introducing yourself in your native language, that you want to walk into the room, be confident, appear to be competent, and impress the people who are interviewing you. That's true no matter what language the interview is in. But when you're interviewing in a foreign language, it's even that much more difficult or intimidating. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I must have taken part in hundreds of interviews, both as the interviewee, the person being interviewed for the job, as well as the interviewer, the person conducting the interview and deciding, should we hire this candidate or not. And one of the things that I've noticed for most positions, one of the things I looked at is how confident is this person? What kind of impression do they give? Especially when you're hiring for someone that's going to meet other people. If you're hiring for someone like in a back office job, or very technical, they're not going to deal with other people, they're not going to deal with customers or clients, that sort of thing, then maybe it's not that important. But when you're hiring a lawyer or a lecturer or somebody that's going to deal with sales, those types of positions, you want someone that is going to show self-confidence. That when you meet that person, you're kind of impressed, like, oh yeah, this person knows what they're doing. I can trust them, to represent the company, to represent our business, that sort of thing. And if you start out very weak, it's very difficult during the rest of the interview to kind of overcome that weakness right in the beginning. So I think it's paramount when you first enter that room, first sit down, first meet these people, that you give a strong, good impression. What they always say, there's only one chance to make a good first impression. So don't blow that opportunity. Now, another theme that I've noticed just in general in life, and when I teach students or young lawyers, young professionals, a lot of times, no matter what line of business you're doing, what the purpose is, when you're getting ready to talk to someone, whether it's a formal speech, a formal sales pitch, or a legal argument in court, no matter what it is, there are always a lot of variables. You don't know what the reactions are going to be. You don't know what questions they're going to ask. So you want to be ready for that. But usually at the very beginning, and sometimes at the very end, that's the time where you can really most prepare, that you can be ready, like, okay, how am I going to introduce myself? How am I going to start? How am I going to finish? How am I going to end this? And what goes on in the middle may be very different. You might not have full control of it. You might be reacting to their questions, to their physical reactions. Do they look interested or not interested? Do they understand you or not understand you? You want to change what you're talking about. But at the very beginning, you probably can predict how it's going to go to some extent, and you want to be ready for it. You want to be ready and confident when you begin. For a job interview, there still are variables. You usually don't know, is it going to be a one-on-one interview? Are you going to meet one person, or are you going to meet a panel of 2 or 3 or sometimes even more people? Are you going to meet them before you go into the interview room? And maybe you'll have some time to really introduce yourself before you even go to the interview room. You've already made that first impression before you enter the interview room. Or, maybe an assistant secretary brings you to the interview room and then boom, the interview is on. So you want to be ready in either situation. When I help people to get ready for the interview process, I always say, as soon as you enter the building, consider the interview as already begun. You don't know who you're going to meet in the lobby. You don't know who you're going to interact with on your way to the office, the floor, the interview room. It doesn't really matter. But some of those people you might see in the interview. Some of those people might report to the interview people, to the interviewer. And if you leave a good impression, it's going to help you. If you leave a bad impression, that's going to hurt you. And it may be that the negative impression means you're not getting the job. A positive impression probably doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but a negative impression probably means you're not going to get the job. So you want to treat all the secretaries, assistants, whoever you meet on the elevator, in the lobby, on the way to the interview, you want to treat them with respect and as a professional. You want to display professionalism and common courtesy. Now, once you're in the room or the floor, the office, wherever it is, you don't know who you're going to meet first. You're probably going to meet a receptionist, secretary, some kind of assistant before you meet the interviewers, but you never know. Maybe the interviewer is there waiting for you already. Hopefully you're not late, but maybe they're there or nearby. Maybe they're just finished up the prior interview, that sort of thing. But whoever you meet, you want to treat them with respect and show confidence. Before you get off that elevator or enter that building, enter that final office door, maybe take a deep breath, pause for a second, breathe in, breathe out, think about what you're going to say, think about how great a person, how strong a candidate you are, and then walk in with confidence. Not necessarily swagger, overconfidence, but confidence, that you deserve to be there, you deserve this interview, and you should get this job. This job is yours. It should be yours. Now, when you start meeting, talk with confidence. If you're starting with the receptionist, whoever's there answering the door, say who you are. Hello, I'm Timothy Barrett. I'm here for an 11 o'clock interview, or I'm interviewing, with Mr. Donaldson, or I'm interviewing for the whatever position. And most of the time, hopefully, they kind of anticipate who you are. They know who you are. Maybe there are going to be several applicants. Maybe there's several interviews for the same job or different jobs, depending on what kind of situation it is there. But you want to make sure that you announce your name and say your name confidently. I frequently run into this with students, is that when they're talking, they might say, hi, and they're at a very loud level or nice level. Hi, my name is, and I'm here for the whatever. Well, wait a second. When you said those first words, if I couldn't hear, I could probably figure out what they are. Hello, how are you? Good morning, I'm here for. Those words are important, but they're not very important. If I don't hear one or two of those words, I can figure out from the context probably what you said. But your name, I can't figure that out from the context. Unless you're the only person I'm expecting, then I have you on a list, sure. But if there's more than one name, or I'm meeting you for the first time, maybe I'm not expecting you, your name should be very clear. Your name are the most important two words that you say in that sentence, or three words, however many words in your name. But that's the most important words in that sentence. So you want to make sure that you are loud, slow, and clear when you say your name. They should not have to say, what was that name again? Who are you again? You want to be very sure that they understood your name. And if you have a difficult name, maybe, no matter how clear you pronounce it, it's difficult for other people to pronounce your name, then maybe say it twice, or, say it once and then say it slowly, or something like that. But work on that so you are natural when you say it. And you never want to make someone uncomfortable because they can't say your name if you have a difficult name to pronounce, or if they didn't hear your name, maybe that they don't want to ask you to repeat it again. You want to be confident that they heard your name and understand what your name is, no matter who you're meeting. You're not ashamed of your name. Be confident. Make sure that they understood what your name is. And when you do that, you want to maintain eye contact. Your eyes are looking exactly at their eyes. And that's very important. If you're looking down, it kind of looks like you're embarrassed or shy, not very confident, not the look that you want in a job interview. Or if you're looking to the side, you look kind of distracted, like maybe you're waiting for something else, maybe you're nervous, or maybe you don't really respect the person you're talking to, like, oh, this is just a secretary. I'm looking for the big boss or something like that. That's not very respectful to that person that you're talking to. You always want to look at them in the eye. This is true once the formal interview begins as well. When you're talking to the interviewer, most of the time you want to be looking at their eyes. Now, if you have a panel of interviewers, where 2 or 3 or even more, how do you do that? Well, generally, if somebody is talking to you, you are looking at their eyes. So only one of them should be talking at a time. So you're looking at their eyes when they're talking to you. And then when you answer them, you look at them and answer them. Now, as you continue your answer, if it's more than just a short sentence, now you can look at the other panelists, you look at the other interviewers, and kind of rotate between them, so that you're kind of giving roughly equal attention to them. Now, maybe there's one that's obviously the chair, one's the boss. Maybe you want to give them a little bit more attention. There's nothing wrong with that. Consider it. Now, sometimes one of them might be looking at notes, they're on their computer or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not paying attention to you. They're looking at your CV, they're taking notes about what you're saying, that's fine. But obviously you don't need to spend time looking at their eyes if they're not looking at you, So then, oh, they're looking at their computer, let me go to the next one. That's fine. And don't feel like 100% of the time you need to be looking at their eyes. You can look around, that sort of thing. Maybe you have your notes or your paper, if you're looking at, that's fine too. But most of the time, you want to be maintaining eye contact, especially in the introduction, especially when you're meeting them for the first time. Again, first impressions, very important. Another thing that goes with the introductions is often the handshake. You're probably going to shake their hands. When you do that, you want to be very confident. Now, if you're from a culture or country, or you're interviewing in a culture or country where they don't shake hands or something, then take that into consideration. Maybe ignore what I'm about to say. But certainly in the United States and most of the Western world, it's very common you're going to shake hands when you first meet someone. And when you do that, you want to be very confident. You want to hold their hand firmly. You don't want to, you're not playing a strength game. You're not trying to hurt their hand or anything like that. But you want to hold it very firmly, grab it for a moment, a couple of seconds, few seconds, and then release it, and then that's it. Ideally, you don't have sweaty hands, so a lot of times if you're nervous, it's common for your hands to start to sweat. Maybe you're in a suit, maybe it's a little bit warm, that's added to it as well. So try not to have sweaty hands, wipe them on your pants or something, I don't know. But try to have dry hands when you shake hands, but do it confidently. A lot of people hold that the handshake is very important, and they'll make a solid judgment about it. Oh yeah, this person has a solid handshake, they're trustworthy, I can rely on them, they're confident, or this person is kind of limp-wristed, they're not confident at all, they're just a little kid, they're not ready for a real job yet, that sort of thing. So take that into consideration. What to say when you're introduced to the interviewer? There are a couple of scenarios where this could happen, so you want to be ready for each. But generally, like I said, you want to introduce your name. Hello, I'm Timothy Barrett. Pleasure to meet you. I'm glad to meet you. Nice to meet you. Something like that. Now, once you get past that receptionist, past that secretary, and you're meeting the actual interviewer or the interview panel, again, you want to say your name. Hello, I'm Timothy Barrett. Pleasure to meet you. Something like that. If we want to be a little bit more formal than hello, normally we'd say good morning, good afternoon. If it's late, we might say good evening. But if it's an interview, it's probably going to be good morning if it's before noon, or good afternoon. Good afternoon, I'm Timothy Barrett. Nice to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. Good to meet you. Something like that. Now, if the receptionist just announced you, oh, this is Timothy Barrett, he's interviewing, he's the next applicant, something like that, then you don't have to restate your name. They just said it might be a little bit awkward. If there's more than one interviewer, maybe they didn't hear it, maybe you want to say it anyway, that can be fine. But if it's clear they just heard your name, you don't need to restate it, so skip over that part. And also, if they said their name or you were introduced to them, whenever you meet someone in an interview or someplace else, networking event, and any type of context, it's good to repeat their name. hello, I'm Timothy Barrett. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Smith, or it's nice to meet you, Frank. It's nice to meet you, Jane, whatever it is. And then by repeating their name, one, you're kind of helping yourself remember it, so that it's easier when you hear someone's name. If you repeat it, you're more likely to remember that name and associate it with the person that you're seeing, as well as psychologically, most people like to hear their own name. It sounds kind of silly or narcissistic, but psychologically it's true. We like to hear our own name. So it's good to repeat their name now and then, even in the interview. And besides that, it shows attention to detail, that the receptionist introduced their name or they gave their name, you are paying attention and you can repeat that name. It's not a very high bar, but if you can do that, that's a positive thing. Now, I say that, the caveat, if they have a difficult name, we talked about if you have a difficult name, if they have a difficult name and you're like, wow, I'm going to butcher that name, or I'm nervous enough as it is, I know I'm going to butcher that name. If I don't have time to practice it or say it out loud a few more times, listen to it a few more times, I'm just going to destroy that name. Okay, don't say their name, no problem. So that's certainly one exception. You don't want to mess up their name. And if it is a panel, if it's more than one interviewer, it is good in your mind if you can remember who is who. Oftentimes in an interview, you can't really take notes. Depends on what kind of interview it is and the situation. If I am taking notes, that would be definitely something I would write down. Okay, Jane was on the left, Frank was in the center, and Mary was on the right. That sort of thing. So so that I can remember, and then I can notice who is who. Or sometimes they might give you their business card and make sure you kind of put it in order. Okay, the person on the far left was on top, then the next person, then the next person, then the next person, so you can kind of remember that. Or often when I finish an interview, I'll leave, I'll find a bench or something to sit down, go to a coffee shop, and then I'll kind of debrief myself. I'll go through and make notes. Okay, who was sitting on the left? Who was in the center? Who was in the right? What did they say? What did he say? What did she say? And try to note that when it's fresh in my memory. By the time I drive home or get home, I might have forgotten some details. So I want to do it as soon as possible. So when you introduce yourself, you're generally going to say your name. You want to repeat their name back to them. And now, what else do you want to say? Now, it kind of depends on the context here. Usually, you're going to exchange the names and some pleasantries, maybe some small talk before you kind of get into the meat of the interview. Remember, as soon as you walk in the building, the interview has already begun. And sometimes they might explain the process. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and that sort of thing. So they might talk more. I know when I was the interviewer, after the introductions, I might explain a couple of things, maybe talk about the position as I see it or as I saw it, and then ask more questions to the applicant. But that time I might be, as the interviewer, talking a little bit more, and then after that, I want to hear more from the applicant. But I just want to set the scene, how's this interview going to go? Or maybe explain some things that I'm looking for or that are important to consider. This video is not going to get into the interview itself or get too far. The only other thing I'll add with the introduction is be ready to talk about yourself. Often the first question is something like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background. Tell me about your current position. Tell me about your employment history. Or if you're a recent graduate, tell me about your university history, your educational background, your educational history. And so you can often predict these. Sometimes the question is a little bit different, but generally you can predict what kind of question is going to come up. So you want to be able to talk about yourself. Talk about who you are, what you do, what your past employment history, present employment history, educational background. You want to be ready to discuss those things. All right, it's time to conquer that like button and make it ours. If you did enjoy this video, please watch some of the other videos. I'm sure you'll like them just as well. If you have any other questions about interviewing in English or the job application process in general, please drop them in the comments. Work hard today and enjoy tomorrow. you.